Keiki is a second-year high school student who lives with his sister Mizuha and is yearning for a relationship. One day in school, a senior student, Sayuki, messages him to meet in the club after class. He sees the entire club room filled with trash and begins cleaning alongside Koga, Nanjo, and Mizuha. After cleaning the whole place, Keiki returns to the storeroom and finds an anonymous letter addressed to his name. Additionally, the letter comes with a pair of panties, and thus begins his voyage to discover his secret admirer. The following day, he discusses it with his friend Shoma, who narrows the list of potential suspects to the club members because only they had access to the club locker room. Keiki is overjoyed by the confession and devotes the rest of the day to figuring out who sent the letter. He returns home and asks his sister if she knows who the last person to leave the club room was. She reveals it was Sayuki, and he takes her on a date to investigate, where she recounts and thanks Keiki for saving their club from collapse. When he asks if she has affection for him, she flees away, adding to Keiki's dilemma. He follows her for a few days, and she avoids confrontation with him, but he finally gets a hold of her and tells her how he knows her secret. When she hears this, she cordially invites him to meet her in the club room after school. When he sees her there, Sayuki illustrates her dog collar and divulges her wish to be treated as a pet. Her secret, as it turns out, was not the love letter, but rather her masochist character. After this crazy encounter, he comes across Okita-sensei, who commends him for his commitment to the club. She recounts how he forgot to lock the door after he left, which puzzles him because he vividly remembers locking it. Later, he discusses it with Shoma, claiming that his lover hid in the room when he received the letter. That implies that any club member could have written the letter, so he decides to look into the others. Later in the library, Sayuki continues her masochistic behavior when Koga arrives and asks her to keep her distance. Sayuki reveals how she and Keiki went on a date, and Koga runs off in anguish. Later, Koga contends he takes her out on a date on Sunday to make her feel better. At home, he discusses it with Mizuha, who teaches him the etiquette of treating a girl right, as he's never been on a date. He takes her to the movies and surprises her with a live-action adaptation of her favorite book, followed by a casual lunch at a fast food restaurant. After visiting numerous shops and purchasing nothing, Koga excuses herself to the restroom, but gets disrupted by some boys who pester her. Keiki arrives at the rescue and later apologizes for letting her out of sight. Koga kisses his forehead to show her gratitude for being a gentleman, and they both take a bus home. On the way, he reflects on how he met her and wonders if every date would be as pleasant as this one if she were his secret lover. The following day, he visits her in the library where Koga builds up anticipation before asking him to become her slave. When he refuses to comply, she offers her panties as a price, which also fails, so she presses him down and shoves them into his mouth, making him unconscious. Keiki awakens from a nightmare the next day, still feeling the effects of being knocked out by Koga's underwear. In school, he finds Koga's bra in his locker room and confronts her. She claims she did this to get his attention because he has been neglecting her since the panties incident. When Koga expresses her master-slave mentality to him, he grows terrified and flees. As he returns to his locker, he discovers an inappropriate photograph of him with Sayuki, who begs him to visit her in the club room or else she will expose it to the public. There, he finds her in a maid costume and handcuffs. As he asks her to change, she discloses that she dropped the key into her breasts and requests that he pull it out. After he complies, she deletes the picture from her phone and encourages him to acknowledge her in exchange for physical intimacy. He refuses and flees, claiming he cannot do such things when there's no love among them. Later, Nanjo strolls in on Koga and Sayuki, asserting their authority over a tied-up Keiki and liberates him from the two. Outside, she confesses her frustration about Keiki's devoting most of his time to other girls, suggesting she has feelings for him. Koga and Sayuki apologize to Keiki the next day for detaining him and upsetting Nanjo. They both ask him to reconcile with Nanjo, and he returns to the classroom to find her sleeping. He says he'll listen if she needs to say something because that's what friends do, so she invites him to hang out with her. After visiting the arcade with her and Shoma, he opts to walk her home. However, it starts to rain, and the pair seeks refuge in the shade. Nanjo is chilled, so Keiki goes to get them some warm drinks. When he returns, he notices her staring at a picture of Shoma on her phone and asks if she likes him. Embarrassed, she runs off in the rain alone, and Keiki returns home wondering what happened. The next day, as he gets back home, Mizuha soothes him and asks if something is irking him lately. He describes the problem, and Mizuha says she is available if he needs to speak with someone. The next day, he walks in on Nanjo sleeping again, but she gets up and leaves as soon as he approaches. He apologizes for hurting her and promises to go to any lengths to win her back. So Nanjo requests that he be in a relationship, but not with her, instead with Shoma, for the sake of her gay comic book. When he declines, she vows to ruin every girl relationship he ever has. As he returns to the locker after ruling out Nanjo as his secret lover, he finds a note and a picture of him pulling out the key from Sayuki's boobs. The note invites him to the astronomy club, where he meets a silver-haired hooded girl. Later, he discovers that Koga and Nanjo have also joined their club, compounding his agony. Before leaving, he recalls his encounter with the silver-haired girl, who turns out to be Shoma's admirer. He meets her in a cafe, and she introduces herself as Ootori. She wants Keiki to act as a matchmaker between them because he is Shoma's best friend and threatens to leak the photo if he doesn't comply. He asks her to speak directly to him because she is petite and cute, but she says she is a third-year student, which is an issue because Shoma prefers younger girls. At night, his sister discloses that the girls wear different colored clothes based on the year, but all the girls wear pink skirts for summer, which will be the ideal situation to set up Ootori and Shoma. The next day, he arranges for the two to interact, and Shoma is instantly drawn to her, thinking she is a junior. Everything goes according to plan, and Ootori even gets a picture with Shoma. Keiki comes home still pondering who wrote him the love letter and reviews everything that has transpired so far with Ootori, who believes that because the primary suspects have already been ruled out, it could be any girl from the building. On his way to inquire further, he comes across the vice president of the school council, Fujimoto, whom he saves from falling. He asks her to get back up now, but she sniffs him and requests to let her linger for a while. Later, he asks Miss Okita if she saw anyone near the club room the other day, and she recalls Fujimoto walking through the corridor. Fujimoto meets him at the school park and presents him handmade cookies as a thank you for saving her from an accident. She says it is getting late for class and hugs Keiki before running off. Later, he goes to the astronomy club where Ootori provides him with all the information she has on Fujimoto. After a silly encounter with Koga in the club, Keiki is visited by Fujimoto, who invites him to volunteer to clean up the town. Sayuki overhears their chat and chooses to join in so she can keep a watch on her master. However, she heads home early after yet another silly incident, leaving Keiki and Fujimoto alone. While cleaning, she falls into the water and he gives her his jacket so she doesn't catch a cold. She sniffs the jacket and thanks her for being so considerate towards her. The next day, he meets her in the student council where she prepares him a dessert. She snuggles him while he eats, and before he can ask her about the letter, she falls asleep on his shoulder. Keiki falls asleep as well and wakes up to her being a little too forward. She reveals she has a kink for male body odor and asks him to hand over his underwear. Okay, what's going on with the girls in the series? Later, he third wheels on a date between Ootori and Shoma, and the two seem to be getting along just fine. He wants to take it one step further before Ootori reveals her age, so he proposes they go on a double date. He returns home and wonders who to take for the double date and ultimately chooses Sayuki. They go bowling, and Ootori gets nervous as Sayuki knows she is a third-year student. Keiki urges her not to say it out loud as it will ruin the date. Later, she reveals it's her first time bowling and that she doesn't like sports. Keiki asks her why she tagged along, and she says she couldn't tell him no since he is her master. She proposes that the first place gets to draw something on the fourth place's face. Additionally, the third place has to follow one order from the first place, and everyone agrees. Ootori gets first place, Keiki gets second, and Shoma gets third, which means that Sayuki lost. Getting punished by her own rules, Sayuki's face now says that she has big breasts. Later, Ootori thanks Keiki for helping her and states she will take matters into her own hands from here on. However, that doesn't go as planned, as Shoma rejects her after finding out that she is a senior. Later, Keiki tries to convince him to accept her, which seemingly works as he walks into the astronomy club later and apologizes for dumping her. He says they can start out by being friends, to which she agrees. Just then, Shoma turns on the lights and sees the walls covered with his pictures and learns the stalking nature of Ootori. Keiki awakens the next day wondering who the panties belong to and hides them underneath his mattress. He walks into the bathroom to discover his sister changing, which poses an embarrassing situation. Later, Mizuha asks him to be more careful next time and he apologizes for his blunder. The siblings then talk about Keiki's interactions with his high school girls until Sayuki pays him a visit. She puts on a dog costume and blackmails him into petting her by threatening to show the comic book to Mizuha. While they're at it, Mizuha walks in and he explains the situation to her. Before Sayuki leaves, Keiki questions why she chose him as her master, to which he replies that it is because he is the only fit candidate. Later, Koga arrives and blackmails him into wearing a bunny costume. She then rewards him with her panties, but trips and falls on him, and suddenly Mizuha walks in on her brother being weird once again. This results in another family meeting between the siblings, although Mizuha is skeptical of Keiki's story. Later, he receives a phone call from Nanjo, who inquires if he has ever had a girlfriend. She asks him on a date, but quickly backs down, claiming she was only joking, and hangs up the phone. Just then, Mizuha appears and asks him to blow dry her hair. Keiki inquires if she is angry, and Mizuha walks away, urging him not to neglect his sister. He goes to his room to discover that the panties he had hidden are no longer there. The next day, he discusses it with Shoma and Ootori, who believe one of the guests took them. He goes to the club where Sayuki asks him if he is willing to be her master, to which he agrees for the sole purpose of finding out if she is the one who stole the panties or not. The two go to an amusement park and he takes multiple rides with her to sneak peek at her panties, but fails. Later, when he asks her to choose the next ride, she chooses the Ferris wheel. Inside, since they are all alone, he is about to ask her to reveal her panties, but she licks his face like an obedient dog and he fails yet again. Following that, they go to a calligraphy event where Sayuki's piece wins the first place, and Keiki pets her in praise, making her feel admired. On their way home, they held hands and he eventually mustered the courage to ask her to lift her skirt. She abides, and it turns out she wasn't wearing any panties at all. The following day, he stumbles upon an apologetic Sayuki who claims she now understands Keiki better and flees. In the club room, Koga catches Sayuki eyeing Keiki and asks him to teach her maths to tease her. Sayuki watches in dread as she begins to snuggle up to him. While playing, she falls on top of him just as Nanjo strolls in, and Sayuki starts avoiding Keiki again. He approaches her the next day and she expresses her resentment over him spending time with other girls. He finally asks if she took the panties from his room, to which she confesses. She raises her skirt, revealing that she is wearing Keiki's boxers rather than the panties he was searching for. He runs into Koga on his way home and they both share an umbrella. He walks her home and she welcomes him inside for a warm drink as a thank you. While waiting in her room, he deems it the best opportunity to go through her drawers to see if she has the stolen panties, but she walks in on him and takes a picture that she can use to blackmail him into submission. Koga makes him do her errands the next day until Sayuki questions the two. Things go south and the girls start arguing, which leads to Sayuki running off in despair. At night, he is exhausted from all the servant work but decides to stay solid until he finds out if Koga is the crook he is looking for. The next day, he pays her a visit on command and is compelled to play the part of a butler. She decides to take a shower after making him carry all of the shopping bags and warns him not to look into her drawers again. However, Keiki hears a scream and rushes into the shower, only to find her frightened by a huge spider. She makes him apologize for seeing her naked and asks him to stroke her head. It leads to her narrating the story of her late grandma, and she claims Keiki is the only person who has treated her well after her grandmother died. After she trips on her bed, Keiki notices his boxers under her pillow, and she reveals she stole them the other day for personal interest. Later, Keiki meets Nanjo, who asks him to pose for her comic, and the two go out for drinks. She says that she has received an offer from a manga publisher but is uncertain of what she wants. She then asks if he is single, and when he says no, she sits on his lap and teases him. After she dips, he runs into Fujimoto, who hugs him and gives him a 5-person ticket to the nearby swimming pool. He goes to the astronomy club to invite Otori and Shoma, but they decline his invitation. While they are picking up the photographs on the floor, he grabs one of them and freaks out, claiming to know who his hidden lover is. Keiki asks Sayuki, Koga, Nanjo, and Mizuha to accompany him to the swimming pool, and they all ride a bus to the place. There, Keiki is ready to uncover the mystery of a secret lover since he saw her face in the picture. After swimsuits, water guns, and slides, Keiki catches up with Mizuha, who asks him to spend more time with her. However, she catches a cramp in her leg, and Keiki carries her outside. He gives her a piggyback ride, which reminds her of their childhood when he tried to carry her after she sprained her ankle. Just then, they find Otori, who seems to be a part-time worker at the pool. She is hosting a girls-only confession competition, to which all the girls agree, and the winner will give one command to Keiki that he must obey. The competition begins and Sayuki, Koga, and Nanjo all say their anonymous confessions about Keiki. However, in a surprising turn of events, Mizuha appears on stage and confesses her love for her brother, Keiki. The crowd loves her confession and gives her the biggest score, while Keiki wonders what he has gotten himself into. Later, the two meet, and he reveals that he knows she was the one who wrote the love letter and left her panties in the club room. She agrees with the assumption and tells him she wanted to confess, but was afraid to lose him. Keiki says it's not okay for them to have such a relationship as they are siblings, but Mizuha reveals that they are not even related by blood. A few days later, Keiki wakes up from a nightmare of being married to Sayuki and finds Mizuha by his side. She gives him a morning kiss and Keiki scolds her for snuggling with him all the time. She persists by pressing him down and he leaves the house to avoid doing anything funny with her. We see a quick flashback of him calling his dad, who confirms that he and Mizuha aren't related. He meets with Otori and Shoma, who urge her to date Mizuha since they aren't siblings, but he declines, claiming he always thought of her as a sister. He decides not to go home to avoid any encounters with Mizuha and sits in a park where he meets Nanjo. Meanwhile, Mizuha wakes up from a nightmare and contacts Keiki, who has been ignoring her calls all day. It gets dark and rainy, so Mizuha goes out with a pair of umbrellas to look for her brother. On the other hand, Keiki is strolling in the rain and returns home with a fever. Mizuha tucks him to bed and he wakes up to Sayuki taking care of him. Later in bed, he recalls his first encounter with Mizuha when she was adopted into the family. He walks into the toilet and comes across Mizuha completely naked once again. He apologizes and sits outside the door, where he asks if she is upset. She reveals how she thought Sayuki, Koga, and Nanjo were gonna steal him from her and apologizes for making him sick. She says it was love at first sight since he was kind to her from day one and thanks him for taking care of her. She comes out wrapped in a towel and hugs him. As Keiki decides he will always be her brother, her towel falls off and they both laugh it off. And on this funny and confusingly romantic note, our recap comes to an end. We hope you enjoyed this little story. Drop us a like and subscribe to Annie Recapped for more amazing animes like this to watch on your feed, and click that notification bell to stay up to date with the latest uploads. And with that said, we'll see you in the next one. Peace!